Welcome to Facebook Live, Friday at 1:30. Thanks for joining us. Today we're going to talk about something that is kind of near and dear to my heart about why you should not get adjusted. Obviously, I'm a chiropractor. There are values to being adjusted and using chiropractic manipulation, and it can be a really powerful tool when it's the right tool for the patient case. But what's also important to understand is it's exactly that. It is a tool that should be applied to the case when it's the right tool for the individual and for the situation going on. And a lot of chiropractors would argue with me over that, but I think there are some points that chiropractors won't argue and some points that kind of come down to philosophy. First of all, one of the reasons you shouldn't get adjusted is if you have pathology or some sort of major concern going on. That's something that no chiropractor is going to argue. We're trained in to do exams to make sure that there's nothing going on that the adjustment can be detrimental toward. So certain autoimmune conditions or certain brain development things that kind of come with being congenital the way you're born might be reasons that you might not be adjusted or you might not have a good candidacy for adjusting. There are different types of adjusting. So in some cases we change the type of adjusting we use. In some cases we don't adjust at all. It depends. But that is why we do require an exam, or most offices require an exam before we actually put a patient through adjusting or through treatment. It's because we want to make sure we look for those things, we rule those out, and we make sure that it's going to be safe to utilize the tools that we're using. So that's definitely something that's non-arguable. Another reason that you wouldn't get adjusted is if you're hypermobile or relatively unstable. Now this is a point that a lot of other chiropractors would argue with me over, and some of it comes down to philosophy, but my argument is this. One of the reasons that we use adjusting, not the only reason, but one of the reasons we use it is to create movement where movement is lacking. If we have a patient that is really hypermobile or overmobile, maybe genetically they're just kind of built like Gumby, they're super flexible, or maybe they've been over-adjusted in an area, so an area is really extra loosey-goosey floppy. In those areas, I don't necessarily believe adjusting is the best tool. We want to re-stabilize the area. We want to create the ability for the body to control motion. Instead of being really loose and unable to stabilize, if that's inherently what the patient kind of has, then we may need to back off of adjusting so we're not creating more motion where motion is lacking, if that makes sense. So again, fit the tool to the problem instead of just using the tool all the time. So that hypermobility or that extra motion would be a reason not to adjust. Another reason not to adjust might be because of pain or spasm in the area. Sometimes we just can't get you all the way to the end range. In order to give an adjustment, depending on the technique we're using, we have to be able to get you into the proper position. And if we can't quite get you there because of muscle spasm or pain, sometimes it's a matter of changing the adjusting technique we use, but sometimes the adjustment just isn't quite the right tool. Maybe we need to use a different tool or a different technique to try to bring down pain or bring down muscle spasm. And then once we can get you to the proper range, then we can go and utilize that tool or technique. So again, kind of the big three categories that I would say would be number one, if you have pathology or a major problem in the area, that's going to be screened for and looked at any examination before we do the actual treatment plan or adjustment. The next one would be hypermobility or too much movement in a given area where you can't stabilize properly. In those cases, I would recommend that we use more stabilizing techniques instead of techniques that create more motion. And then number three would be if you have pain or a limiting factor that doesn't allow you to get fully to the end range of motion, then sometimes it's worth breaking that cycle first to where we can get you into the proper position to be able to utilize that adjustment. Thanks for joining us this week. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week at 1:30.